Hi, Ball Charter students. I hope you're all doing well. I've been doing some readings with some books, a little older, Black Level on Payback on Poplar Lane, and more of a younger skewing book with Don't Let the Pigeons Drive the Bus. So I thought I'd go mid-range and read a little bit. And I know one very popular series in the library is The Magic Treehouse. And I also know there are so many Magic Treehouse books. This one is one that I grabbed, Lions at Lunchtime. Because I think lunchtime might be coming up, well, about an hour or so for some people. Now, I know the adventures of Jack and Annie. I know they encounter many different creatures, adventures, animals, all throughout in historical times, all throughout different courses of the day. But let's take a look and see what this particular one is about. This is chapter 1, Before Lunch. Jack and Annie were walking home from the grocery store. Jack's pack was heavy. It held a big jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread. "Are you going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?" said Annie, "or a peanut butter and honey sandwich?" What would you go with? I think, personally, I would go with peanut butter and banana. That sounds really good to me. But some of you might like jelly. And if you do like the jelly, do you like grape, strawberry, cherry, raspberry? What kind of jelly do you like? Anyway, or do you like honey on your sandwich? Anyway, let's get back to this. Jack started to answer but stopped. "Oh, man," he whispered. "What is it?" asked Annie. "Look at that." And here you can kind of see what they're looking at. And it looks like there's an antelope or a deer or something in their driveway or on their sidewalk. He pointed to the edge of the Frog Creek woods. In the shadows stood a small, delicate animal. It looked like a tiny deer. "It's a sign," whispered Annie. "Remember when we saw the rabbit? He was a sign of the Wild West." The deer-like creature leaped into the woods. Jack and Annie didn't stop to think. They followed as fast as they could. Jack's heavy pack thumped against his back as he ran. Finally, they stopped and looked around. "Where did she go?" he said. "I don't see her," said Annie. "Oh, wow," said Annie. She pointed up. There was the magic treehouse. It was shining in the noon sun at the top of the tallest tree in the woods. Its rope ladder swayed in the shadows below. "Where's Morgan?" said Annie. Morgan Le Fay wasn't waving at them from the window. She wasn't even at the window. "I don't know. Let's go up," said Jack. They climbed the ladder and went into the treehouse. Sunlight streamed through the window. It lit a stack of books and 2 scrolls in the corner. The ancient scrolls held the answers to riddles Jack and Annie had solved earlier. Jack took off his heavy backpack. "Did Morgan leave us a 3rd riddle?" said Annie. "Looking for someone?" said a soft voice. Jack and Annie whirled around. "Morgan!" said Annie. Morgan Le Fay had appeared out of nowhere. She looked ancient and lovely in the bright light. "Do you still want to become master librarians?" she asked Jack and Annie. "So you can help me in my work?" "Yes," they said together. "Wonderful," Morgan said. Then she reached into her robe and pulled out a scroll. "You solved 2 riddles so far," she said. "Here is your 3rd. She handed the scroll to Annie. "And for your research." She pulled out a book from her robe and handed it to Jack. The book's cover said, "The Plains of Africa." And here's Morgan Le Fay handing the book to Jack and Annie. Look at all those stacks of books. That's a good treehouse, if you ask me. "Africa," said Jack. "Oh man, I've always wanted to go there." He opened the book. He and Annie stared at a picture. It showed hordes of zebras, tall giraffes, big animals with horns, and tiny deer-like creatures. "Hey, that's the animal that led us here," said Annie. "A Thompson's gazelle, I believe," Morgan said. "Where are the lions?" said Jack. "You'll find out," said Morgan. Maybe we need to plan this trip," said Jack. Morgan smiled. "No, go ahead. Make your wish now. Annie pointed at the picture. I wish we could go there, she said. Be careful, said Morgan. Just keep an eye out. For what? Said Jack. The lions, of course, Morgan said. Wait, said Jack. It was too late. The wind started to blow. The treehouse had started to spin. Jack squeezed his eyes shut. The treehouse spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. Jump, beast, jump. Oh, look at that. There's their treehouse and the tall giraffe. Excuse me. Bright light flooded the treehouse again. A rustling sound came from outside the window. Annie peeked out and laughed. Hey there, she said. Jack looked out too. A giraffe was eating leaves off the tree. It had a sweet, goofy face. Jack peered at the world beyond the giraffe. He couldn't believe his eyes. He saw a huge grassy plain, a wide river, and tons of birds and animals. More than he had ever imagined in one place. Giraffes and zebras were on the side of the river where Jack and Annie were. Thompson's gazelles and the big-horned animals were on the other side. Where are the lions? Said Jack. I don't know, said Annie. Do you think it's always this crowded? Well, let's find out, said Jack. He picked up the book on Africa and looked at the pictures of the animals. He read aloud. Every year, in late spring, thousands of zebras and gazelles and millions of wildebeest migrate from the dry plains of Tanzania to Kenya. What's migrate mean? Said Annie. Jack pushed his glasses into place. It means they go someplace for part of the year, like birds going south for the winter. Oh, right, said Annie. Jack turned the page to read more. Before they are safe in Kenya, the animals must first cross the Mara River. Zebras go first, then the wildebeest. The tiny gazelles swim last. Oh, said Annie in a sad voice. What's wrong? Jack asked. Poor beast, she looked out the window. They seem afraid. On the far side of the river, the horned animals were standing at the edge of the steep bank of the river. They stared down nervously at the rushing water. Jump, beasts, jump, Annie shouted. Don't be silly. They can't hear you, said Jack. He studied the broad plain. I wonder where the lions are, he said. I don't know, but I have to go, said Annie. Go where? Said Jack. To the river to help them. Help who? Said Jack. Those wild beasts on the other side, said Annie. I have to help them migrate. Are you nuts? Said Jack. Annie handed Jack the scroll and started out of the treehouse. Wait a second, said Jack. We haven't even read Morgan's riddle yet. Annie stopped on the ladder. Read it now, she said. Jack unrolled the ancient scroll and read aloud. I'm the color of gold and as sweet as can be, but beware of the danger that's all around me. What am I? Let's reread that again and see if you can start to figure that out. I'm the color of gold and as sweet as can be, but beware of the danger that's all around me. We'll have to see if we can figure this one out, huh? Annie started down again. Annie! We'll look for the answer in a minute, said Annie. What are you doing? Jack called. But there was no stopping her. Jack watched as she hopped off the ladder. Then she started to walk through the tall grass between the zebras and the giraffes. I don't believe her, he said to himself. He quickly put the Africa book in his pack. And then he started to go down the ladder. When he stepped onto the ground, he looked around carefully. The giraffes were eating the tree leaves. The zebras were grazing in the grass. Tons of birds flapped overhead. This is okay, he thought. He just had one little question. Where are the lions? Come on, Jack, Annie called. She was almost to the river. Just a minute, he shouted. Just a minute, he shouted. He wanted to study the giraffes and zebras. He pulled out the Africa book and found a picture of giraffes. He read, "The giraffe is the tallest animal in the world. Its legs alone can be 6 feet tall. Its hooves can be as big as dinner plates. The giraffe has a very powerful kick, which makes it dangerous to attack. For this reason, lions tend to avoid giraffes." Jack pulled out his notebook and wrote, "Notes on Africa. Number 1, lions avoid giraffes." It's good information to know. He turned the page and read more. Zebras live in family groups. As no two zebras have exactly the same pattern of stripes, even baby zebras must learn its own mother's pattern. Jack studied the zebras, trying to see their different patterns. But in the hazy afternoon light, all the stripes made him dizzy. I can imagine it kind of looks all the same, especially if you can't get up close enough. He blinked to clear his head, then read more. Zebras are the first to cross the river because they eat the coarsest grass. That means kind of the roughest, not smooth. That's what coarse means. After they've thinned down the top layer, the wildebeest arrive and eat the next layer. They prepare the grass for the gazelles who come last. Oh, wow, thought Jack. Each animal depends on the one that goes before it. How cool is that? He wrote, point number 2, animals all connected. Jack heard Annie shouting from the riverbank, "Jump, beast, jump! You can do it! Don't be afraid! Come on!" He looked up. Annie herself was jumping as she called to the wildebeest. Jack sighed. I'd better stop her before there's trouble, he thought. He put away the Africa book and his notebook. Then he jogged towards the river. His pack was heavy and lumpy, bumping against his back. He'd forgotten to take out the jar of peanut butter and the loaf of bread. Jack decided to leave them at the treehouse. He turned to go back. But just then, Annie's shouting stopped. Jack looked at the river. She had vanished. "Annie," he called. No answer. Where was she? "Annie!" Jack shouted. She had completely disappeared. Oh, man, said Jack. Their trip had barely begun, and already disaster had struck. He forgot about all the stuff in his pack. He just ran as fast as he could. He wove his way between the grazing zebras and giraffes as he raced to the river. Suddenly he heard, "Help!" Annie called. Oh my goodness, that sounds like a good place for a cliffhanger. So we're going to stop right there, just so these videos won't be too large, and we'll pick up in the next segment. Take care, friends. See you soon, I hope.